Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Everything is Energy podcast. Today, we're going to explore the month of June. I'm recording this on June 2nd, 2026. We're going to talk about the energetic forecast is what I'll call it, but essentially it's the astrology, what's happening, the energy, the numerology. And June is really a month that feels like a bridge between worlds. We're standing simultaneously between what has been and also really being upgraded and reminded that we are the creators of what is becoming. And there is certainly movement in June. Several important planets are changing signs this month. We have a new moon, a full moon, a Mercury retrograde, as well as a fairly significant uh, transit as Chiron is entering into the sign of Taurus. So, even though that's a lot of activity, and I'll get to that in a second, I want to say that the invitation of June is not about speed. And this is coming on the heels of a little bit of the astrology of this week. It's not about getting to where we want to go as fast as we can. It's about aiming and wisdom and being in the process. So if I were to summarize June in a single sentence, it would be that it's asking us to seek wisdom before action. It's also asking and inviting us to remember our value and to prepare to lead from the heart. And, the astrology and the numerology are converging around a very similar language. And they're saying that this is a month for listening carefully, observing deeply, and really allowing insight to emerge before rushing forward. So, as we're going to move through the month, I'm going to talk about the numerology off the top, and then we're going to get to the astrological shifts, and we're finally going to bring it all together into a broader picture. So, June is a number 6 month. Every June carries the vibration of the number six, and six is the number of love. It's a number of stewardship, community, family, beauty, as well as responsibility and care. And, six really asks and invites us to tend to what matters to us and to nurture what is growing. Six also invites us to become conscious of our obligations, our commitments, not be from a place of burden, but from a place of devotion. There's a heart soul energy. And six also reminds us that we're not alone. We're never alone, and that healing happens often in community and in showing up and in consistency and in acts of care, that those things that might seem tiny, but they might really create the foundation for meaningful change. But yet, that's June, and that's arguable that that's every June. But 2026, as we know, is a universal number one year. So that makes June 2026 a universal 7 month. And this is where the energy, I think, becomes especially interesting because seven is the seeker. Seven is the mystic. Seven is, and it's great that we had the Sagittarius full moon just the day before we started June. Seven is the philosopher. That's very Sag energy. And seven is the researcher, also very Sag. But also seven really invites us to look beneath the surface of appearances and really discover what's true, to look beneath the surface of the physical world and feel and use our intuition and our wisdom to really navigate for what is true. So, where six is focusing on relationships and responsibilities, seven is about wisdom and discernment. And both are active here. I'm offering that seven is the more of the moment thing, the stronger energy. But in general, this is not a month that rewards impulsive action. It's a month that rewards observation and right timing, excuse me. And the challenge of the seven is that it can feel slow. because the mind wants answers. And especially if we're moving and living in times of transformation, there's this part of us that is really ready for something to shift, and things are shifting. But, where the ego wants certainty and the collective may feel pressure to move quickly, seven teaches us that wisdom cannot be rushed, that where we're headed is, and the wisdom that we're seeking must be cultivated. And it often emerges through our inner world, through reflection, through contemplation, and even through just simply lived experience. And so as we move through June, one of the things we can do is just observe and notice where life might be asking us to become more curious versus to become certain. And that's an interesting thing because certainty has its merits, but curiosity is where it's almost very Gemini, right? It's kind of like inviting us. Also, it's very Sagittarius energy too. But it's inviting us to open our minds, to expand. And, there might even be it might even be a good month for us to notice where questions may be more valuable than answers. Because the questions lead us to the things we don't know what we don't know, right? And also it's, notice where our inner knowing is asking for our attention. So the seven vibration is actually becoming more important as Mercury is preparing to station retrograde this month, and that's happening at the end of the month, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I really wanted to start with the numerology because I feel like it's preparing us for the astrology, and the message is pretty. If I could simplify it, it would be slow down enough to hear what life is teaching us. So let's get to some of the astrological aspects of what's happening. I mentioned that there's a lot of new shifts that are happening in the middle of the month. On June 13th, we have Venus entering into Leo. And, Venus has been in the emotional and protective waters of Cancer. And now Venus is entering a sign associated with creativity and joy and courage and self-expression. And, Venus and Leo just ask such a wonderful question. What does our heart genuinely love? What makes us genuinely joyful? And I feel like, in one sense, it might be like, what is our little kid self? What would we want to do? So it's not about what's practical. It's not about what's expected of us. It's not what earns us the most, approval or likes or whatever. It's asking us energetically, vibrationally, emotionally, what brings your spirit truly alive? And really, this transit of Venus and Leo is inviting us to connect, to stay connected to, authentic joy. So it's worth remembering that Venus's orbit is about 225 days, and she spends 4 to 5 weeks in a sign. So this transit is beginning on June 13th. It will end in the middle of July, but it's really a palpable shift to have Venus move from Cancer, which is very inward, nurturing, to the community-oriented Leo. And so again, if we're being invited to connect to our authentic joy, it's about celebrating and creating and maybe even sharing ourselves more authentically or more fully. And, one of the ways, and this is absolutely not the only way that this can look, but it might, bring some renewed inspiration around art and music and teaching, performance, writing, any kind of creative expression, cooking, some way that really feels like you're adding your energetic signature to something. And also, Venus and Leo is not simply about being seen. It's about allowing the heart to become visible. So that means that, the transit's reminding us that wisdom is not found only through contemplation. Contemplation has its space, as I mentioned, in the universal number 7 month. But Also, sometimes it's totally okay to have wisdom arrive through creativity, through that kind of joyful inspiration, beauty, laughter, love. And so Venus in Leo is really beginning to open the heart, and this is taking place just before the Gemini new moon on the 14th. And it's really setting the stage for a month that invites us to blend curiosity and courage. And now, as always, I will do a separate podcast for the Gemini new moon. That is exact on June 14th, and that's just one day after Venus enters into Leo. And I mentioned, Gemini's energy is already afoot, the curiosity, the wanting to explore, the wanting to connect, and this sense of possibility and expansion via new conversations and new ideas that we may not know yet. So this new moon really feels like an invitation to become a student of life. And again, with this new moon, the questions might be more important than the answers. And the conversations that we have might become doorways, just like the ideas that we have might become seeds. And really, it's about allowing new information to circulate. And if we're in living in these times where, I've mentioned that we're going through a transformation and we likely can maybe not even conceive of the beauty and the majesty of what's possible. We only get those brilliant downloads when we let go enough to really have new downloads. So, with under the new moon and in this month, we might feel ourselves drawn to something new. Maybe it's a course of study, maybe it's exploring some new perspectives, or maybe it's just meaningful conversations. I personally feel like well, I'm going to be offering some things that I myself have been the student for a little bit of time now, studying for my naturopathic doctor degree, and I want to offer some really cool tools for integrating plants and herbs into the cycles of the lunations that we are working with. So you'll be hearing more from me about that. But um, just to put a pin in this new moon is really less about certainty, it's more about exploration. And it's about allowing ourselves to gather new information. It's about allowing ourselves to follow our curiosity. And the Seven Liberation Month supports this just so beautifully, where the part of us that is the seeker or the student or the observer or just the one who wants to know is being awakened. And so June is just absolutely reminding us that curiosity itself can be a spiritual practice. So about 5 days later, on June 19th, we have Chiron entering into the sign of Taurus. And Chiron's orbit is a little bit more wonky and funky than Venus's. By wonky and funky, I mean it's not very much not circular. Its orbit is anywhere from 49 to 51 years for a whole cycle, but it spends between 1.5 and 8 years in each sign. So, and Chiron is an aspect that I really adore. And I offer that it might be one of the more or most important shifts of this entire month. And it's certainly, well, it's not like the big outer planetary shifts that I keep going on about. It's absolutely part of this transformation. So let's look at where Chiron spent the last several years in Aries, bringing collective healing around identity and courage and self-definition and personal agency. That's what Chiron does. It shows us our wound so that it motivates us to find healing. But when Chiron enters into Taurus, the focus is really going to shift and it's going to feel, I'm not going to say dramatic, but it's a definite shift. And, now the collective healing journey, which is first and foremost with us ourselves, but also with the collective. This is about Taurus type themes, resources, security, self-worth of all the kinds, embodiment, stability, self-value, and also so important, our relationship to Mother Earth. And really, the transit's going to invite some really wonderful questions. Do we believe that we are worthy of the things that our heart desires? Can we receive support? Can we trust life? Can we trust our intuition? Can we trust our bodies? And can we trust Mother Earth herself? And so, for many people during the coming years, healing may become less about striving, Aries, and more about remembering, Taurus, but remembering inherent value, remembering that we are worthy, remembering that we are connected, and remembering that worth isn't something that's earned. It's something that's recognized. And this transit feels especially relevant, and this might just be my lens, but it might not be, for those working with herbalism, but also with food systems and regenerative agriculture and embodiment practices and ecological stewardship. The healing journey is going to become tangible and rooted and earth-centered. And the wisdom of Taurus reminds us that transformation isn't only spiritual, it's physical, it's embodied, it's lived. Let's keep clipping along here in June. On the 21st, we have Sun entering the sign of Cancer, and that is also the solstice gateway. So I think it's pretty cool that not exactly, but on the same day that the Sun enters Cancer, we arrive at the solstice. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's summer solstice. In the Southern Hemisphere, it's winter. But Cancer is shifting our attention toward home, toward family, toward belonging, toward ancestry, toward nourishment, and really emotional wisdom. And this is where the sixth vibration of June becomes especially visible or relevant. We may find ourselves reflecting upon foundations in our lives. Where do I belong? What does nourish me? What kind of future am I creating for myself and for everyone around me? Also, what deserves my energy? What relationships deserve my energy? What am I truly devoted to? And Cancer teaches and reminds us that vulnerability is absolutely not weakness. It's wisdom. And wisdom is an operative word this month as well. So, Sun into Cancer on the solstice is kind of this apex activation, reminding us that emotional intelligence is every single bit, if not more valuable than intellectual intelligence. And solstice just feels like a sacred, I said apex, but it might also just be a pause point, a moment to honor how far we have come and to consider where we're being called next. Not through force, not through shoulds, not through ego, but through feeling. We're headed toward the close of the month, and then I'll kind of give a whole recap. But on June 28th, we have Mars entering into the sign of Gemini. And this is a inner planet, so Mars changes signs fairly frequently. But this, Mars into Gemini is going to start to accelerate the energy. Conversations might multiply, ideas might move rapidly, information might start to circulate more quickly, but also curiosity might really become energized. So this transit has the potential to be really amazing for communication. That might be 3D communication, absolutely, writing, teaching, networking, learning, exchanging ideas. But it also might be communication, as I like to remind us, that is vibrational. But also let's note that, Mars and Gemini, there is the potential to become overstimulated. And there is the possibility of scattering energy across too many projects or to become distracted by every new possibility. So this is again where the 7 vibration of June is just so perfect, especially as this is the start of this transit. Because discernment matters. We live in powerful times, but it's up to us to really know what is true and what we're being drawn toward, and what to speak our truth and to express our truth. And so I would just offer that, not every conversation is going to deserve our attention. And not every opportunity is going to require us to act on it. And not every opinion is going to require us to respond to it. So, and that's the wisdom, I think. Mars and Gemini is really inviting movement, but the seven vibration is inviting wisdom. And I think together they're reminding, they're activating, they're teaching us that strategic action is where it's at rather than reactive action. But then we get to the full moon, which is on June 29th, and the full moon is in the sign of Capricorn. And it's illuminating the axis of Cancer and Capricorn. And, this is one of the year's most important full moons, I would offer, for examining the structures that we have built in our lives. Where Cancer asks, what nourishes me? Capricorn asks, what am I building? What am I building and why? And where Cancer might seek emotional security, Capricorn seeks tangible achievement. And throughout June, we're at the end of June by this point. We've been gathering insights. We've been reconnecting with our values. We've been listening for deeper wisdom. And now we have at the end of the month this full moon in Cap. And it's really inviting us to bring those insights into form. So this lunation is going to shine some light on our systems, on our commitments, on our responsibilities, on the long-term goals that are shaping our future. And maybe it's a really good time. Full moons are times of illumination. Where have we matured? Where are we being called to take greater responsibility? What structures are supporting our growth? But equally important, what structures have outlived their purpose? Pluto just left Capricorn. We are still in the energy of shaking some things out too. So this full moon might bring some revelations about our career, our purpose, our leadership, our business, or some kind of long-term planning. And for many folks, there might be a realization that the next chapter of life can't be built upon old foundations. And so really, this is on the 29th, but it's still very much a part of the vibration of June. And the wisdom that we gained earlier in the month is now really seeking practical application. So this is a full moon of embodiment. I'll have a whole separate podcast for us about it. It's about embodiment and commitment and becoming. And, the universal 7 month adds a really wonderful layer here. Cap's often associated with external achievement. But 7 is reminding us that true mastery begins internally. So the question isn't what am I accomplishing because I need to accomplish something from a space of beholding to the 3D world. It's what am I building, and am I building something that actually reflects my truth and who I really am? And on the same day, and it's adding significance to the full moon, we have Mercury stationing retrograde on the 29th. And this timing is remarkable. I love astrology because when we get these themes and the patterns start to really show us that the theme is legitimate. So, just as the Cap full moon is asking us to evaluate the structures of our lives, Mercury is inviting us to pause before making definitive decisions. So again, this suggests that June and this is at the end of June, so this is also potentially moving into July. But these energies it's not about immediate execution and accomplishment. It's about assessment and in terms of Mercury retrograde, review, reflection, revision. You know, some things that come to mind are, what commitments deserve renewal? What plans need to be adjusted? What conversations require another look? What assumptions need to be re-examined? Mercury retrograde and all retrogrades really invite us to revisit if there's anything that's unfinished business. But in the context of the Capricorn full moon, it feels particularly focused on long-term direction. The mountain remains that the Capricorn goat is steadfastly, step by step, climbing up. The destination remains. yet the route may require some refinement. And again, the universal 7 month is perfect because it's encouraging patience and wisdom and remembering that not every answer arrives immediately and not every path reveals itself all at once. And that is absolutely the case for 2026. There's so much new stuff that we haven't even conceived of. So here, I would offer sometimes with the Mercury retrograde, maybe it's about that the wisdom emerges through a willingness to reconsider. And then we're not even done because on June 30th, we have Jupiter entering into the sign of Leo. So, I think this is another really exciting astrological shift. Jupiter spends about a year in every sign. So Jupiter's entering Leo. And this is great because it's kind of capping off this month that has been devoted to, contemplation and discernment and reassessment. We have, Jupiter entering into Leo and beginning to kind of open the door to a new chapter of creative expression. And let's remember that Jupiter expands what it touches. And, in the sign of Leo, the heartfelt regal lion, that expansion is going to happen through creativity. It's going to happen through leadership of all kinds. Leadership can be amongst a group of friends taking an initiative. Leadership doesn't have to be the thing that we think it is, but Leo is absolutely about being willing to stand and help others who might benefit from our wisdom. And Leo's also saying this expansion is happening through confidence. But it's not egoic confidence. It's about generosity and heartfelt expression, self-expression, heart-centered living. So, Jupiter in Leo is going to be with us for a while. It's a really wonderful heart-based shift that's going to help ground down all those outer planet shifts and help us really realize that we are the change. So, some of the questions, what gifts are you here to share? What wants to be expressed through you? And what would happen if you trusted your light? So I would offer that this, I'm doing this on June 2nd. I think it's a really wonderful month for us to notice the progression of what unfolds throughout June. Venus is entering Leo, at the first part of the month, opening the heart. Chiron is entering Taurus, which is beginning healing our relationship with our own value and our own worth and our own worthiness. The Cancer solstice reminds us to reconnect with what nourishes us. The Capricorn full moon helps us evaluate what we're building. Mercury retrograde encourages this kind of thoughtful reassessment. And finally, Jupiter and Leo is just saying, now bring your gifts forward. Not because you have everything figured out. This is heart-centered authenticity here, right? And not because the path is perfectly clear, but because growth requires participation. We're creating and we're learning and we need some feedback, and it's important for us to contribute and express. So this is not a transitive ego by any stretch. It's a transit authentic contribution. And the world absolutely does not need perfection. It never has, but certainly not right now, not in these times. The world needs presence, the world needs courage, and it really needs people who are willing to embody their gifts and share them generously. So, as we step back and view June as a whole cycle, there's a pattern that's emerging, and this I would offer is a month of preparation. It's a month of listening, it's a month of gathering wisdom before taking action. And the Universal 7 month is really inviting and encouraging this notion of discernment and contemplation and deeper truth. And the Universal 6 is really asking us to apply that through care and stewardship and devotion to what matters. Venus and Leo is opening our heart. Gemini, new moon, opens the mind. Chiron entering Taurus is really healing our relationship with our own value, our own embodiment, and Mother Earth. And the Cancer solstice is reconnecting us with this belonging and this sense of nourishment. And Mars entering Gemini is just really energizing communication and curiosity. There's so much going on. Then the cap full moon is illuminating structures that we're building for the future, really helping us to see what is and what isn't working. With Mercury retrograde, we're going to get some reassessment opportunities. And then Jupiter entering Leo is just this whole new cycle right at the end of the month for heart-centered expansion. So I know I've spoken for a while, but I have one more thing I want to share, and that is just that June is not asking us to rush forward. It's asking and inviting us to build wisely, to listen before we speak and to reflect before we act, and to really trust the flows and trust the intuitive guidance and to remember what truly matters to us, what resonates with us in that childlike wisdom and knowing, and also that we're supposed to be joyful. But also when the time comes, then we're going to step forward with courage and we're going to lead from the heart. All right, guys, have a blessed June. I will see you for the new moon in a little bit of time. I'll see you for the weekly astrology forecast next week. Bright blessings, happy June, and so much love.